Welcome to the Read Your Keys podcast. I am your host, Joel Lopez. If you're enjoying the content, please subscribe and like those buttons. What is it? Spotify, YouTube, and there's another one. What's the other main one? Spotify, YouTube, iTunes. There it is.
iTunes, yeah.
I'm rusty. This is it's been a long layoff. I had a new baby, so I'm rusty on my intros, but this is the Read Your Keys podcast. I have Roobz on. You can find her on Twitter at Tishray. She is Copial Dissolvi Mysticism, all that is divine, beautiful, and good. Usually busy reading, creating, writing. What is that? Forgetting and daydreaming?
Yes. Yeah.
Welcome, Tishray. Welcome, Roobz.
Thanks so much for having me, Joel. I'm really excited to do this.
Man, I'm rusty. It's been a while. I was up early this morning. I was up later than I wanted to be, and I was up earlier.
Does the baby wake you up like early?
That's mainly my wife, but yeah, because she sleeps in the bed with us, and so yeah, if she stirs or needs a diaper changed,
that's nice.
That'll
That's nice that she sleeps in the bed with you, because I made a tweet about that. Like, I was like, I don't understand putting your newborn baby in another room, and people got so upset with me, like very upset.
Yeah. There's a lot of, parenting is going to really bring out, like, people will bring out the claws because, like, you want to know that you're doing right for sure, like you individually, but now you're talking about doing something right for your kids. Like I will put out my own thoughts on parenting for the most part, but I'd rather say them in person. Yeah. But because you're not going to really convince anybody of anything, so they're going to be really entrenched. And one time, like I remember, like I kind of criticized somebody on their parenting, and I was like, I didn't really feel good about it, even though like I was quote unquote right. I was like,
right.
People are doing the best that they can. Yeah. But the sleeping thing, it was great for us because my wife breastfeeds, so she's able to the baby stirs, okay. She can breastfeed, baby can go back to sleep, because we did that whole baby in the other room like right away, and it never sat right. And
this
so
is your fifth
my fifth child. Yes.
So yeah, that's a lot, because I have 4 siblings. There's 5 of us in total. Okay. I grew up in Pakistan, so I never even, the whole like Western way of parenting is a little bit different than how it is in Pakistan. So like when I put out my observations of like what I've witnessed with like moms and like babies sleeping in the same bed, and like mom not even doing any like physical activity or work after she gives birth, even like while she's pregnant, because there's like they just treat pregnant women as like very sensitive, and even when a newborn baby is born, it's like a very, I don't know, it's a very big deal. And that it's not necessarily the same thing here all the time. And so when I'll like put out my observations of how like my culture interprets these things, it's always a little bit of a clash, right? Because you're talking about 2 different cultural perspectives.
Right. And it's just like you can't really imagine it. We so we're I was born here, but I'm Mexican, and so like we have those that stuff, but for the most part we kind of went along with what the Western way of doing things, but we went from having babies in the hospital to home births.
Oh yeah.
And going from having doctors to midwives and doulas, and the experience for her, because for me, it's like I'm the daddy. You're gonna be going through, this experience of the just say the pain of labor. You're gonna be going through that, so I want to support you, because I could whatever I thought was best. It's still like you're the one that has to do it. So I'm gonna give input up to a certain point, or what I think, but you're the one that's gonna have to go through it. So I was hesitant to do it at first, but after like having that first experience in the hospital, like I remember, with our first, she was born in the hospital, and it wasn't comfortable. It's like the sterile environment, all that kind of went with it. But I remember like my wife sleeps on like on the hospital bed, and I'm sleeping like on a cot or whatever, and you're tired. But I remember like in the middle of the night, like somebody came to get my daughter and they just like took her. And like I was awake and I was like, whoa, like where are you going? And it's like, oh, we're going to do her hearing test. It's like, dude, you weren't even going to tell me like you were going to do this. Like you just like came in and I was like, what? Like what? Like, so you have to be like vigilant. I was like, I did not like that at all. And also like my wife did all the work and like the doctor didn't do anything. Like she, my wife was like unmedicated. She did the whole thing, like, unmedicated. And it was like, oh, like she basically did it. And it was like they wanted her to do like certain things. And it was like her body was telling her, no, this position doesn't feel comfortable. And it was, so that whole thing. So now it's like, we're pretty much like, hey, your body knows what it needs to do, what it needs to look like. And I love it because like the midwife, like I don't like going to hospitals. Yeah. So it's like I don't like going to the hospital. So you go and see the midwife, and like the midwife like comes and like gives me a hug and stuff. I was like, it's like a way different experience. Like it's a much different experience. So if people are open to it, like I mean, everybody does what they think is best. I think that's best. But the experience was going from like I have gone to the hospital route all the way down to the home birth route, and my wife really enjoys it, which is huge because she's the one doing all the work. But like for me as the dad too, it's just much a lot of other benefits that kind of come with it. Right. But I think it's really cool that not only that, I didn't know that I know you had siblings, but I didn't know that you had 5. And so that's going to be kind of cool because like I was one of 3. So like to hear like how my kids are going to be like, we'll see how that goes.
Well, it's been a really like good experience. I remember when I was a kid, I hated it. Like I hated having so many siblings, and I used to like meet other families and friends, and they would be like, yeah, we only have like 1 other sibling or 2. And I was like, and people would be shocked that we have 5. But like, this is the thing that I feel like has changed. And like the more I'm on Twitter, the more I come across families who have, even if they're living in America, they have like a similar family structure. So they'll have like a lot of kids, and the thing that you're talking about with giving a home birth, I'd never heard of that experience, and I've never had kids. Like I don't have kids, and I was scared of childbirth because of the whole thing of like going to the doctor, and like the way they describe it is like you're in a lot of pain and it's just an uncomfortable experience. And then like I got on Twitter and I started hearing this concept about a home birth, because I don't think my mom ever did it. My mom never did it. And like hearing about how beautiful the whole process can be and how wonderful it is to have so many kids, and then like my entire perspective has changed on home birth, pregnancy in general, and even having so many siblings. Now I see it like as a very beautiful thing. So the fact that you're giving that to your kids as well, I think it's a huge blessing, because growing up alone can be pretty like difficult, right? And now I see my siblings as my closest friends. Like they're my best friends.
Are you guys like the age range, is it like 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, or is it like 2-3 years?
It's funny. What? I have an older brother. He's like 3 years older than me, and then it's me and my other brother, who are like, they call it Irish twins, where you're like born in the same year. Yeah. And then it's my younger sisters, and my youngest sister is 16. Okay. So for reference, it's like the oldest is 25 and the youngest is 16.
Oh, so it's kind of like us then. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of gap between like the last and the first, but in between, like we're all kind of like
bunched together.
Close together. Yeah.
Yeah, so there for sure a lot of fighting, because that's my kids. It's like they're so close in age, so that's like the closer they are in age, the more they fight. Yeah. But I really like that you said that you're so close, because that's what I want. I want my kids to be. I want them to be close. Like as a father, like I want them. I love them, and regardless if they love me or not, that's their choice. But I want them to love each other for their sake. And there's nothing like seeing like one of my kids do something good for another one of them. It's just like warms your heart. It's just like, this was unprompted. They just did it because they want to. Like yesterday was Father's Day, and we were out to eat, and one of my kids got some like stuff like to serve the other kids, and it was just like, oh, like say thank you, and like recognize that your sibling took the time to like think about you guys and serve you, and it's just like, it like absolutely warms your heart. And we were actually thought we were going to be done having kids, but like throughout the whole shutdowns and stuff, like it was we're all here for each other. And so part of me was like, I want you to have another sibling so that you guys can, if everything is crazy on the outside, well, you guys can be together. You're going to have similar experiences, backgrounds, or whatever, but you guys can be together. And that was like really one of my thought processes. Like I thought we were done. Like I'm not like as young. I'm not young-ish anymore. Like I feel young, and I feel great, but it's just like, well, I thought we thought we were done. And it was just like, you know what, let's try again. And it's been amazing to see like the kids now with the baby. Like they're all about the baby. Like they want to help, they want to change diapers. And so like I'm sure for your parents, because like they're so close, it's really tiring, because like everybody needs you. Like everybody needs, like, you guys are so close. Like you were probably like 3 years old, your brother's 5 years old, and you have a 1-year-old. Like they all need you all the time, and it's like it's hard. It really is.
And for my mom, like, it was especially tough because my dad was here in Canada when we were all young. And he was like working and getting like, the paperwork done for us to join him here. And my mom was in Pakistan alone with all of us. So like all of us were born in Pakistan. I came here when I was 8. And
wow.
Here as in Canada. Yeah. And so my mom, like, she was, well, here's the thing. In Pakistan, family systems are like really, really tight. And so we were living with my grandmother on like this huge land that like her and my grandfather had. And that's the house that my mom grew up in. And so we like, my mom needed that family support system, because having 5 little kids, like the oldest was, I think like 11, and I was 8, and then the rest of us like were very little. And so my mom needed that. Like there's no way she could have done it without
how old were you when your dad went to Canada?
I was 6, I would say.
Okay, so there was 3 to 1 year olds in there. Okay.
Yeah, so we were all really, really young, but those are some of like my best memories, because we were growing up with my grandparents, and then on top of that, my aunts were always visiting, my uncles were always visiting, and they had little kids. So I grew up, like, I wouldn't even say in a family of just 7 people, like not just me and my siblings. It was me and my siblings and our cousins, and even to this day, we're all like siblings to each other because we were so close growing up.
I like that you bring that point up, because that's something like here in the West, we'll say, like it's normal for you to go to school and then go off to school, but then from there, like, you're gonna go where the jobs are, so then you might go off somewhere else for work. And so that's great when like you're either single or married with no kids, because it's like you don't have the need. But once you have kids, you realize the importance of being in a place and putting roots down for that reason that you just said, that your mom had that support system. And I'm sure that was a comfort to your dad to know, like, my wife and my kids are around family, that she's not like, doing it alone. Cause I think maybe that might be a contributor why people don't have more kids here, is because they've moved. Because after the second kid, I thought I was done. It was really hard, and I had the family around, but like for the most part, it was like me and my wife, and then my wife doing the heavy lifting for sure. But it was a lot of work. But to have relatives around who are kind of like in the same place, or it's like, okay, I need to go get this done, can you watch the kids? Somebody that you trust to be able to watch the kids and not be like, oh, hey, you know, I'm going to kick you $100 or whatever to watch my kids for, you know, whatever. It makes a huge difference. Yeah. And so, I think that's something that kind of goes unspoken when you're talking about like having a family and why people don't have as many kids here. So it's like nobody is from where they are anymore. You don't have these deep roots, and there's family around like you guys had, where it's like the cousins and stuff. Because like the average person now gets married and they have like 2 kids, and then maybe they're, you know, have 1 kid, and then they live like all the way across the country, and so it's like it's a disjointed family. They're not together like you guys were.
Right. And I think this is like one of the big reasons that I want to have a big family myself when it's time, is because, you know, I always say I don't want my kids to feel like they need to go out in the world and look for a family because they never had the support at home. They never had like the social, I guess the social life at home, and they need to go outside and like find friends and like go to parties, or like, you know, like there's like, I feel like a deep sense of loneliness that causes all of that. And I have to say that like I haven't felt like that, because if I need advice about something, I don't need to go to a friend. I have like an older sibling to talk to. And I try to be that for my younger sisters, because they're not growing up in the same environment I did. Like their childhood was here in Canada. They can't always go to my parents because my parents had a completely different childhood. Right. Right. And so, but I understand, like I'm like that older sister that can relate to the experiences that they're having in a Western country, but being from a Pakistani background.
Right. Cause you're really the first generation, but you kind of straddled it. And I've had this conversation. It is an interesting thing. It's like you have, you know, parents that are from somewhere else, and, you know, there's a way to do things there, and they're good, and there could be good ways, but it's just like they might not understand the challenges of what it's like for you know, their kids in a different culture. Yeah.
And also, like, the fact that the world has changed so rapidly since my parents were kids, like telephones and the internet and even like TV shows, the kinds that we have now, like it's all very different than the environment that my parents grew up in. My parents grew up in a time where like there was like in the entire neighborhood there was one TV, and everybody would go to that house at like 8 p.m. after dinner and watch a TV show. Like there was one TV show. Like it's completely different. The kinds of experiences that we're having now, not only because it's a different country, but because it's a different time. Like, and that's true even in Pakistan now. Like things are just changing with how culture has shifted in terms of like, okay, what do we have now? We have social media. We have like different forms of communication. We have different ways of communication. And because of that, there's just like this massive cultural shift, I would say. Like even my childhood, I would still have a little bit of this like outside time with like, I'd like going out with my friends and I'd like playing in the playground and all of these things. But my sisters are now like teenagers, and they don't really want to do anything. Oh, there's my cat. They don't really want to do anything other than, you know, go on their phones. And it's just a complete, like, I can't even put it into words how different it is just like year by year. And it's feels like it's getting worse and not better. So the challenges that they're going to face are going to be very unique. And they're going to be completely, like, there's a huge generation gap between what my parents experience and what my sisters are experiencing.
No, that's all very, and it's all really interesting that you notice that, because iPhones and stuff or smartphones were already a thing when you were in school, right? So that was part of it. The interesting thing too is you had written on a Substack about like addictions, right? And it was talking about the cell phone usage, and people don't really think about it that way. Like you had mentioned in that article that, you know, people understand like drugs and alcohol as an addiction, but not some of these other things that you mentioned. What was it that kind of like triggered that for you? I was like we know for sure that like what drug addiction looks like, and somebody who's an alcoholic and not being able to function. Yeah. But to think of somebody who is addicted to their phone or social media, or I think you had mentioned porn on there. Like, like what were some of the things that you had seen? Because this is a conversation that I think is interesting, because it's like I didn't grow up with them, so it's like standing back. It's like, oh, like, dude, you're hooked on your phone. Yeah. But for somebody who kind of came up with it, it's like, oh, isn't this normal? Like I'm always really fascinated by people who kind of have that eye to see. It's like, something seems not right here.
Yeah. I think having younger siblings plays a huge like role in my observation of all of these things, because again, like even when I was growing up, we had iPods, and like people use that to play music and like play games, but the games were so innocent. Like it was like, like a snake's, like where you're kind of like just eating and the snake gets bigger. And like that, it's so innocent. Like there was nothing complex about it. But what I see now is that the world has changed to the point where it has become very complex. And everything, like you mentioned, this addiction, right? Like it's not just drugs and alcohol, it's social media, it's what's on that screen, right, that you're consuming, that's hooking you in. Like even TikTok, I know people that can spend like hours literally just scrolling their phone, and they won't even realize like an hour has gone by, right? And it is an addiction. I don't think people see it that way right now because it's so new. Like that we are literally at the beginning of this revolution, because what we have is just the start of what they're creating. I mean, they're going to create virtual reality. It's already here. Yeah. And that's going to be used in everyday life. And I like, the whole point I was writing that article was because I was thinking like it took us a while to understand that, okay, people can develop alcohol addiction or cigarette addiction, right? Like there was a point when those things were common and people didn't really bat an eye at it. Like if somebody was smoking, if your doctor was smoking, you would be like, yeah, that's fine, like a few years back, right? Yeah. And now it's like, okay, no, like this is not okay because there's dangers to it. So what I'm curious about is how long is it going to take before we start saying, okay, there's something wrong here. There's kids getting addicted to social media and porn and weird things because of these things that we've created that you can use every single day with no limitation. Like I'm pretty sure in China they put like a time block on kids' phones, like the government does this, where you can't scroll TikTok for like I think there's like a certain time block where after that TikTok actually shuts down, like you can't use the app.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I'm not advocating for more government input because, like, politically, I don't believe in that.
Right.
But, like, there is, like, this, I am curious about how long is it going to take before we start saying, okay, there's something wrong here.
Yeah, it's making the point to understand that they're limiting it for a reason. So giving kids, carte blanche on, on their phones, like, this is something to be considered because... to people who have interests in, in their country, they're taking interest in those things, and that's something that I've kind of considered too. Like with giving my kids video games and the tablet usage, like wanting to be vigilant to understand, like how long are they on it and what content are they interacting with, because I'm in Arizona, so it gets damn hot here, like crazy hot. And so like right now it's like, triple digits. So it's like, I'd like the kids to go outside, but it's like, I don't even like being outside. So like, I'm not going to get on them about that, but like, I want outside kids. I want them to be, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted more kids too. Cause I could totally be a helicopter dad. Like the first time, so I played sports and stuff, and you could kind of be reckless because it's like, oh, it's your own body, you could take the pain or whatever. But like when I saw my kid get hurt, it like hurt like in my heart, and it was like, oh, that really hurts. Like, oh no, baby, don't get hurt. And so you just want to you just really want to protect your kids, because to see them hurt, it's a different experience. And so I know I could have the tendency to be like, I just want to protect them and clear out the path. So part of my strategy was like, if I have so many kids, I can't know like all the things that they're doing. So they're going to get away with stuff. Yeah. But you know, I do want them to be aware, because like they'll ask too already. It's like, oh, can I have a phone? It's like, dude, you're not going to get a phone for a long time. So don't and so, but you know, they'll see like other people have them. They know that, you know, my wife and I have them. So they like, they're, you know, they're fascinated by them. And I get it. 'Cause like, you know, I kind of made the transition into seeing it. So it's like, okay, like, you know, it's not a big deal, but like for them, it's like super, super fascinating. And like, you forget like how cool these things really are.
Right. Yeah. And the difference is that like, we weren't born into this. Like, we weren't born into a time where like it's the norm, right? Like when I was living in Pakistan, we had like one computer. It was sitting in the living room. If we were doing anything, it was like super apparent, right? Because that computer's not going anywhere.
Right.
But like they're growing up, they're being born into a time, like your kids and even my younger sisters, born into a time where this stuff is really common. Like everybody has a phone. I didn't get a phone until I was 16 when I got my first phone, and it was like this tiny.
Yeah.
It was like a little. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, and it's my sister's first.
Those were
phone
cool.
Was like, yeah, they were, and I'm considering going back to a flip phone too. Like
I tried to.
Did you?
Yeah, like maybe like I don't know, like 7-8 years ago. So I was coaching football, and I was like, oh, I just got my phone, and it's like, and like, you know, I'll run around with the kids and stuff like that. It's like, oh, I don't want to break my phone, so let me try and get a flip phone. And I remember going into the store, and I was like, hey, you have any flip phone? The guy laughed at me. He's like, what? Like this, and this was, you know, like 8 years ago, but I got one, right? And I tried it for a while, and I liked having it because all I was do is talk. But the hard thing was texting. So like my wife would text me like, hey, XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And then so like I would try and text back like 222, 323, 566. And then like I'm like in the middle of a text, and then she would send another text, and it's like, oh, now I'm trying to. So the texting was really the hardest part. But I think it was better for me because it was like, you know, you don't have that constant pool of like, oh, let me check. I wasn't on social media at the time, but all right, got cut off there. But so yeah, I was saying that, you know, I tried to go back to just a normal flip phone, and just the texting aspect of it was a big challenge. So
that's what I'm concerned about. But I feel like I like use my phone way too much already, and I use it for business. Like I use it for work. I need to have it all the time. So I'm thinking like, okay, I'll keep like my smartphone at home and just take my flip phone if I'm going outside. That way I'm not even like tempted to actually go on my iPhone or whatever I have until I get back home.
I consider that too. Is there something where you can do that? Because I was like, you know, like I'd like to have like my smartphone, but then like, you know what, like I'm going on date night or whatever. I just want to just like switch it to the flip phone so like you can get a hold of me. Because that was one thing that was really cool, like growing up, was like like, you know, like people talk about like dating and stuff, and like how people are attached to their phone. Like when my wife and I dated, like it was like you could get a hold of us if you really needed us, but there was nothing really interesting about being on your phone. Like if you were on your phone, it was rude because it's like, hey, you're out with somebody and I'm talking on the phone with somebody else. But now it seems like you could be out with somebody, but then like pop up and like scroll and like and just have that distraction. Like you're able to be present with somebody, and I don't know if like that's something that's being lost. It's like people are together, but they're not really together. Like you're off in social media world. You're not really with the person that you're physically with.
Yeah. Did you, on your pinned tweet, were you like, I think you talked about your relationship with your wife before you guys got married, and I don't know if you said that you guys wrote letters to each other. Yeah. I feel like that romantic aspect of things is lost too with phones.
It makes sense though, right? Like why would you write a letter to somebody? It's going to take a couple of days or, you know, a day to get there, when you could just message them right away. And so I think like I think you've been kind of alluding to that point, like the technology, there's trade-offs with it that kind of come with it. Because like one of my like to go and like pull up one of my wife's letters, like I can smell her, like, and I can also like the form of her letters. It's like, oh, that's my girl. Like, I remember that. And it was also the anticipation, because we were long distance. There was the anticipation of like getting a letter, and that I think that really like solidified our relationship, because I had to actually like talking to my wife, and there was no physical because she was hundreds of miles away. So like the issue, I think, for a lot of people who are young and dating is like, you have so much access to each other, and it's sparks are flying, and they do what comes natural to them, and you don't figure out like, do I really like this person? Because it is super exciting, but it's you're not able to kind of like have natural breaks to figure out like, can I really have a conversation with this person? Because marriage is like, I'm the wife of sexual, and that's like kind of like a thing. But the point was that like, I actually liked talking to my wife, because a lot of marriage is actually not sex. It's actually like the communication, a lot of the talking, the back and forth, and like, hey, what do you think? And like, that's 99% of it. The fun stuff, that's that's kind of the least of it. But a lot of people are kind of, you put that on the front end, and then they're skipping the foundational stuff for the extracurriculars, we'll say.
This is the thing, the instant gratification part of like, not just phones, like, well, it comes from phones because everything is so fast now. It's kind of like transferred over into everything else. So even when you're looking for a relationship, you're looking for instant gratification, right? Like, I don't necessarily need to get to know the, it's funny because I follow like this relationship coach, and she talks a lot about this, and she's like, people like kiss and then find out whether they actually like the person, rather than like find out you like the person and then have physical contact. Like, she advocates for this rule. It's called like 3 months 3 months no kissing. So you're like getting to know the person, you're not making any physical contact. People call her crazy because they're like, oh, like, I need to get to know this person. The best way to get to know this person is make physical contact with them. And it's like, that's not true. Like, it's not true at all, because like you said, when you actually get married, most of it is actually whether do you like this person? Like, do you like being in this person's company? Do you like talking to this person? Do you have common interests? Like, can you actually like sit in a room and not be like bored out of your mind?
Right.
If you're not making physical contact with this person.
Right. Because that is the majority of marriage. But I kind of think of it as like you can be, it's like being drunk. Like you can be so, because my wife was, she's beautiful. Like, it's like you couldn't help it. And I could have focused all on that, but then ruined it because I didn't take the time to get to know her. And I think, I think part of like the divorce rates and stuff is like, hey, you've moved too fast because you did what comes natural. And I don't have a problem, like in marriage, I don't have a problem with it, but like you wouldn't make a big time business decision drunk. And I think people are kind of going into marriage, like if they're having sex, like I think they're being, I think especially, I don't know, I can only speak for men, like they're drunk. It's like, hey man, like this is to me, after like, choosing to follow God, this is the biggest decision. Like, it's going to affect, generations. It's going to affect your life. It's going to affect your money. And if you're doing it having sex, then it's kind of like you're doing it impaired. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And I think that, well, at least my generation, they confuse what love actually is, right? Like, for them, it is physical contact. Like, I feel so good around this person that I want to like physically be in contact with them all the time. That must be love, right? And I think it is like a big part of like loving somebody, having that physical contact. But I think there's stuff that either people in my generation just aren't being told about, like what marriage really is, because I think that even the generation that came before me, they are the ones with like the divorce rates that's like super high. And so that must mean that people just weren't being modeled good relationships for themselves, and it just ended up like down the line, as we went down the line, things just started falling apart more and more.
What's interesting is I think I don't know if you get to it, but you have your storytelling course,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
The stories that have been told, I think like from people from my perspective, we've missed the boat completely on telling the story. Like going back to your talking about pregnancy and being afraid.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch the movies and you watch a woman give labor, it's like, she's like having an exorcist, like she's like possessed and just like screaming and like crazy painful, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I've been through it 5 times. That's like never happened. That's like not at all like what it's like. Like, yes, there is pain and stuff, but it's not at all like what it's like of what I'm experiencing. And it's like, girls are getting the message like, oh, like that's what's going to be like. I don't want to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, or the same thing too. It's like, oh, I'm not going to look like what I look like now after I have kids.
Mm-hmm.
My wife looks amazing after having multiple, like my wife looks like, like to me, like 20-year-olds, because she's taking care of herself. So she's like, she took care of herself. Like she's always worked out. She always, during pregnancy, like I understand in your culture, it was like they kind of pampered, but my wife was like, she worked out because she felt better. Because once I kind of watched it, like labor looks like a heavyweight fight. Like it really does, because she did unmedicated, so it's like you wouldn't go into that and like not like prepared physically for what was going to come. And so like my wife kind of prepared for it, so like it was helpful going through it. But like nobody's telling that story, but nobody's actually telling that story in a way that's just not like lecturing. It's just like, if you saw a movie and you saw a woman who was fit and took care of herself and had a beautiful labor with her kids around and her husband around, and it was just like, oh, like that was you kind of have a climax of like, okay, here's the pain, but you went through it, and then after, like, she bounced back, and it like her husband still loved her. It's like, oh, it's a beautiful story, but they're not being exposed to that.
Yeah, this is a really good point, and it kind of ties back to what I was talking about with TV shows being so much more complex now, and even games, like it's all subconscious programming, right? Like you're being told stories that are very messed up. Like the shows that like are out now, and like even the ones that I watch, like they have stories like the kind that you're talking about, where it's like, no, relationships don't work, or like relationships are like all kind of twisted, where there's a lot of divorce or a lot of breakups. The kind of messaging that's just being put out, like the kind of story that's being put out, exactly as you said, is kind of just contorted. Like people's perception of everything is a little bit twisted now because of what they're being told. And if we were taught good stories, like if this is what a lot of people say, like return or tradition is, and I think part of why that's so effective is because the stories that are passed down from tradition are actually meaningful, and they tell something about beauty and truth, right? But that's not what we get now. And so that plays a big role in why people have such a weird perception of what love is, or what family is, or whether they you hear stories or you watch TV shows of like the girl following her dream and leaving her entire family behind and moving across the world to whatever. Like that's what young girls are going to watch and say, like, that's what I want to do, right? You're not going to hear a story of a young girl wanting to be a mother when she grows up, or wanting to have kids. And if they were being taught that, I'm sure that they would want that, because when you're exposed to what's beautiful, you want it. And I think Twitter plays such a big role in that. At least for me, I joined when I was like 20, and the messaging that people were giving out with the people that I followed, people like you, and people who are, married and happy and who have kids and families, and they want all of that. Like, I was a different person before I was exposed to that messaging. Like, I did not, like I said, I was afraid of, like, childbirth. I had a weird perception of family because, I grew up with so many siblings, but it wasn't always great. And so I was like, I don't really want to have, like, so many siblings, or want to have, like, a big family. And then when people tell you what's good, as a young girl, like, you're gonna listen to okay, what is making people happy? If you watch a TV show and you hear that what's making people happy is leaving their partner and like, doing what they want, that's what you're going to follow.
Mm-hmm.
But if you hear the messaging that's like, no, like, I actually enjoy having my family. I actually enjoy having so many kids. You're going to be curious and wonder, okay, why?
I had a question for you. So I remember when you had posted your pin tweet, and it was talking about your mom and dad, and then you had posted like a mixtape, and it was like something about Bollywood, I think. And I don't know anything about Bollywood, but are those love stories?
Yeah, so Bollywood is like it's pretty romantic. Like they always make their movies very romantic. And the mixtape was actually like romance songs, like kind of like a playlist that my dad had made for my mom and my mom had made for my dad.
Right.
So they would like send them back and forth to each other.
The reason I ask is because Bollywood, right? That I understand it's massive, right? Like it has lots of influence. So well, just as a comparison, you have Bollywood, which is very romantic. Man wants woman, fights for, traditional, like, hey, man wants to woo the woman and all that stuff. I'm all for that, but then you have now entertainment is, men use women and women use men, and it's very transactional. So like you have on one side, the cultural message is, love is good. I don't know if they're marriage or what, but like the bottom line is romance, like that. And over here it's romance is for fools. I think I never thought of myself as like romantic, but I am. Like I'm not like flowers, I don't know, whatever you think of like traditional romantic, but like I will move heaven and earth for my wife, like that. That to me. So like I am very romantic that way. But like I saw, like for me, like I'm big hip hop R&B guy. The music has changed drastically from baby I love you, I want to marry you, to like now it's just very transactional. It's just I just want you for sex, and you don't mean anything to me. And now the women are doing the same thing. And there's no, like that is the story that's being told, and part of it is like, hey, I see this stuff on Twitter, but then it's like, I don't really see that in real life. But then it's like, I can see it in real life, but it's not as prominent. So it's like, I know I'm in an echo chamber, but like, so part of me is like, okay, take it for with a grain of salt. Like this is what they're getting, but also it's not what I see. But I'm in a place where it's like different from other places too. So, that's part of it.
Well, also like majority of this cultural shift you're going to see is actually going to be within schools and within universities, right? Like if you're not part of that environment, like especially as an adult, like if you're married and you have kids and your friends are married and have kids, it is like kind of like a bubble where your life is like that. Yeah. But if you like have, like for me, like I have a younger sibling like that is going through high school right now, and like the stories that I hear is like, okay, like this is very much happening in real life. Like this is very, like, even if I'm a little bit removed from it now, right? Because I like, I work, I have friends, like my brother is married, his wife is like my best friend. So that's
like, awesome, by the way. Congratulations. That's really cool.
Yeah, he got married at 20, so he's like super happy. Yeah.
Nice.
So it's weird because now, like, exactly, I see my sisters in this environment, and like I realize that you can't experience it, you can't know about it unless you're in it, like unless you're in the middle of it. And unfortunately, kids and teenagers are in the middle of it. And so I really do advocate for this, like with CLT, like I work with classic learning tests, they're all for classical education. I really like believe in that because I don't know if I'm going to send my kids to public school. Yeah,
that's interesting that you bring that up. So like my kids were like, so here we have charter schools, and I had a buddy and I worked in a public school, so I coached football, and I was in a public school, so I heard a lot of the stories, and I was like, wow, like this is crazy, like people selling drugs, like, you know, it was rough. The kids were great, but like the stuff that you heard was like, man, this is crazy. But I had a friend who was starting a church, and it was in a school, and on like they had a mural, and it was painted, and it was like seeking truth, goodness, and beauty, and I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, what is this? I've never heard that before. Like schools don't talk like that. Like a lot of the schools here will be like, we want you college and career ready, college and career ready, college. And it was like, oh, okay. Like that sounds fine. Like I didn't know, I had never heard or seen anything different. But when I saw that, I was like, what is this? I didn't know. And so it was a classical education, but it was like, what is the goal here? In the public schools, it was, you know, go to college and get a job, or here seeking truth, goodness, and beauty. And to me, it was like, well, this one here will take them from A to B. This one over here can take them through their whole life, wherever's gonna, you know, whatever sets their soul on fire to go ahead and pursue that. What do I want for my kids? Do I want A to B, or do I want this? And then from there. So there's a big thing about being able to choose where your kids go to school, because like I'm involved, like I'm not, you know, I'm not doing this. But then with the whole shutdowns, we had considered homeschooling, but it was like that whole like that, you know, it's gonna be on my wife, like I'm not confident if I could do it. But then with all the shutdowns, it's like, well, we might as well try it now. And so now we homeschool. So it's like it's like really awesome. it's really cool to kind of see, like I'm a public school kid. Like my wife and I, when we were dating, I was like, my kids are going to public school. It was good enough for me. It'll be good enough for them. Right. And now it's like, no way.
I went to public school too. And like, just like your standard public school. I never knew about classical education until I came across Jeremy Tate. He's the CEO of the Classical Learning Test, and he's a great guy. And he taught in inner city like public schools, and he was just like the horror stories that he like experienced, like, you know, kids with like no parents, kids as young as like 14 like having sex and like getting pregnant and all of these things, and so he started this because there's standardized tests, there's SAT and the ACT, there's no test for classically educated students. So he created the CLT. But yeah, it's like one of those things, you come across it and instantly you're just like, okay, what is that? Because you're right. Public schools don't talk like that. They don't talk about cultivating the entire human being or cultivating virtue and truth and goodness. And when you hear those words, I think you're naturally attracted to it, because as human beings, that's what we're about. You know, we're not about, you know, working until we're dead and having no sense of relationships, no sense of a human connection, no understanding of what our desires really are. And I think classical education is the best chance for students or for young kids to like actually hear stuff like that and not just hear the only reason you're here is to get a good grade and to get a good job.
Yeah, that's it. And so what's the point?
You're homeschooling your children now. Are all like 5? Well, the baby not, but are all 4?
Well, the thing with this school is that we've kind of like mixed it up. So they started off in the charter schools, and then it was like, okay, we're gonna bring them home, and then we had, you know, they all went to like a Montessori preschool. So like we have somebody that was like love her to death. Like she's like the gold standard. So like all my kids have gone to her. And then we had my son. We just had they all kind of did kindergarten because we like the school, and it's like, you know, very structured. But the thing too that is like my daughter, she did really well with it because it's like structured, and you know, she would do the work even if it was kind of like she was like, this is easy, I can do it. But my boys had a hard time because it's like so much. And so it's like, you know, you learn as you go. It's like, oh, like, you know, you do the best that you can. And that's a big thing for me. It's like my parents did the best that they could.
Yeah.
I give them grace. I love them for that, because they just did the best that they could with what they understood. And so like I tell my kids the same thing. It's like, I'm gonna mess up. I'm doing the best that I can. I've never done this before. I've never had, you know, a 10-year-old. I've never had an 8-year-old. I've never had, you know, a kid like you. So I'm going to mess up. So you're going to have to deal with it, but know that I do it all in love. So like you kind of figure it out. And that's kind of one of the beauty too about having a lot of kids. It's like, you know, we've learned from the first and the second and the third and like, you know, the baby, and it's a whole different experience. But so even now, so like, so yesterday was Father's Day, and I was planning on buying this, you know, smoker, because it's like, oh, like, you know, I like barbecuing and stuff like that. And then my wife came to me and was like, hey, there's this curriculum on sale, and this is what I'd like to do. Okay, so smoker is staying at the store. I'm buying the curriculum, but it's like, you know, you're trying it out, and then I think that's part of what I want for my kids too. Is like, hey, you know, if something doesn't work, you don't have to stick with it. We could move quickly, and that was something that I like about homeschooling. Is like, I remember when I was in coaching the school, it was like it was like 5 or 6 years in the works to have a coding school, a school where they could code. And now it's like, well, if you were in like kindergarten and you wanted to go to coding school, like, you know, you're in 6th grade now before that school has come up. So you missed that window of opportunity. Whereas my kids, like, if there's an opportunity for them to learn some kind of coding curriculum, I'm the superintendent. I control the budget. Like, okay, like, yeah, we could course correct right now and do this thing. So I think we kind of integrate some kind of like the classical education stuff and entrepreneurship stuff, but it's like, hey, like we're trying to fit it for their interests, not for me to put my interests. So like I'm gonna guide them. There's gonna be boundaries for sure, but like my goal is to them. It's for them. Like their education is for them, not for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, so like I said, my parents, I mean, they grew up in Pakistan. Their entire life was in Pakistan. So when we came here, like for them, it was just, you know, you go to school, you go to university, and that's really it. And so, like, all of us, like, the older siblings, we all went to university. Like, we took the normal, like, pipeline. And now that it's come down to my youngest sister, who is just getting ready to go to university, no, my mom's just like, you know, you don't have to go to university if you don't want to. Like, it's like, because exactly as you said, it's those things, like, you've tried it out. Like, you've seen it with the other kids. Okay, how has it played out? And now you're like, okay, well, it worked out or it didn't work out for them, but like you want to give your kids that freedom to be like, okay, well, you have other options. And I think like when I was growing up, that wasn't really the case. Like parents didn't really do that, right? But now with the world, it's changing. And so my mom was like to my sister, hey, like you can learn coding, like you can learn IT stuff, like there is you don't have to go to university to do any of this. You can start your own business. And I think like that, like exactly as you said, as a parent, you just have to try your best. And like with my parents, I'm so grateful that they've always been willing to adjust. Like they'll like say something that they're used to, and then I'll just be like, yeah, mom, but things aren't like that anymore. And they're always willing to learn and adjust their like parenting to, okay, like we're living in an entirely different world now. So how do we adjust? Basically,
and
ask that question.
I think it's interesting. It's not like that is fair, because like some we'll just say some kids would say that just because they're trying to like get their way. It's like, oh, like everybody's doing it. But when you're saying it, it's like, yeah, it's not like that. Because I think college used to kind of be like this gold. It was kind of like a golden ticket. That's kind of how it was sold to a lot of you know, students, kids, families. You go to college and it's like, you're going to make more money and all this stuff. But now it's like, well, you're going to get saddled with, you know, a lot of debt. And it's like, what are you really getting out of it? And I think it's really interesting that your mom was like, oh, you don't, maybe that's partly because of your path, right? Because you've kind of taken like after university an untraditional path. Is that part of it? Oh
yeah, definitely. I think once I started doing that, my parents realized that, okay, like you don't necessarily need it. And I was kind of that, I was always like the black sheep of the family too. I would stray a little bit and do my own thing, and it would be new for the entire family. Like this entrepreneur thing, like none of my family had never experimented with that, anything like that. And so when I did it, It was something different from the traditional path.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, my parents were interested, and that's what I love. Like, I think as a parent, it's a tough job, but like the worst thing you can do is like just kind of not listen to what your kids are saying at all and enforce your kind of viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents did that with my older sibling, and they realized it was not the best thing to do. And so with me, they were more open to hearing like, okay, like what is it that you're actually working on? And so when I told them about all this, I think they understood that companies don't really care anymore whether you have a degree or not. It's more about your skill. And with the internet, there's so much opportunity to actually gain some sort of a skill and then make money without actually being employed to anybody.
That's wild.
And
That's
so,
actually
yeah.
wild to me because I'm like, well, you making money on the internet? Like
Yeah.
to me, like I remember when MySpace came out, and I was like, well, that's a waste of time. And then when Twitter came out, like that's a waste of time. And Facebook,
Yeah.
that's a waste of time. Like I got to go to work, brother. Like I got a mortgage, I got kids. Like I'm not
Yeah.
wait. And then like now, like seeing like people like you and like other people who are like, you guys really make money off of this?
Yeah.
How does that work?
It's funny because I woke up this morning and I was like, it was like, I don't know, 6 a.m. And I was like, I'm still tired. I think I'm going to sleep for like another hour. And all I could think was, I can't imagine waking up at 6 a.m. and rushing to like get dressed, go into work. I still remember, because I used to work retail. I still remember what that felt like, where in the morning you really don't want to be somewhere, but you're there and it's just, everything is like kind of, like, I don't know, even know how to describe that feeling, but you know, like, just being in a rush in the morning, getting to work, doing your job, and then being glad the day's over.
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't have to live like that anymore. And I tell my parents this, and I'm like, if there's a better opportunity, if there's a better route, let my siblings take it. Because I guarantee you it'll be better for them in the long run than doing, like, going into debt and then perhaps not even going into the field that they were initially. Like, 4 years is a long time to change your mind as a university student. It's very rare for somebody to pick one thing and go all the way to the end 4 years without realizing maybe they don't like it. Maybe they want to do something different. You know, like, it's a long time to change your mind.
What was it that kind of unlocked the skills that kind of unlocked and opened up that for you? Because I mean, it's one thing to be like, hey, I'm in university, I'm working retail, which sounds about right for a university student, like from like 20, 30 years ago. It's like, yeah, you go to school and then you work your job after, like, and then so like, you know, as much as the technology can be used to, you know, in a negative fashion, like it actually it's worked out really well for you. So what was it that worked out for you where it was like, hey, this was the skills that kind of like opened up some doors for me? Because I really believe that gifts can open up doors for people.
Yeah, well, I was always interested in like creating content. I had Instagram for a while. Like, I was I think 17 when I got it, and I really liked the idea of sharing stories. Like, that's what my brand is surrounded around now, because I always loved doing it. And initially it was just like for fun. Like, I was a kid, I didn't really know anything, but it was nice to like make graphics and like post quotes and like all these things. And then I realized, okay, like, I can actually make an audience. And I tried a lot of different things. I would see other people doing stuff like drop shipping and you know, affiliate marketing, and I was like, this is like really cool. I just knew from the very beginning that I didn't want to be working retail, and I think that lit a fire, because I knew what I didn't want to do, and so even if I didn't know what I wanted to do, I was going away from what I didn't want to do, and so I would just experiment with a bunch of different things, and then like right before COVID happened and the pandemic, and I was like, oh well, I think like people are gonna lose their jobs because of this pandemic, and I think I will, because malls are gonna shut down. And then I was like, okay, like, I need to get serious about this. I started posting on Twitter a lot more, and I always say success is a mixture of consistency and luck. So if you're consistent with something is going to happen that you haven't really directly made happen, but you gave it an opportunity to reach you. So I was like posting on Twitter a lot. I took it very seriously. I was like, okay, like, I just need to build an audience. That's what I was doing. And then Jeremy Tate, who is the CEO of CLT Exam, he came across my content and was like, hey, like, I really like what you're doing. What would you think about being a contractor for us and like basically managing their Twitter account and like create copywriting, ghostwriting for them. And after that, it was just like one door open, and I was like, okay, like wow, people actually do this. Like they make money doing this. And so I took that opportunity, and then I didn't stop. I just kept going.
And then so from there, you moved from Canada to the U.S.?
Yeah. I moved to the U.S. Well, that was a bunch of different reasons. I'm still in university. I have like my last year left, but with the pandemic, Canada was kind of a mess. They shut everything down. And so I couldn't complete my education. And with the university, I was like, okay, I need to apply somewhere else. The company I was working with was also in the US. And so I was like, okay, like if this could turn into something bigger, I'd want to be in the US, and like I'll finish my degree and everything as well. And you have to understand that Canada was basically shut down like for 2 years. Like there was nothing happening. You could not go in, there were no opportunities even as a university student. So I made like a decision, and then what ended up actually happening once I moved to the US was that I started working more on my business. And so it like basically I expanded my business, and now I'm in the process of finishing my degree because it's only a semester left now, and I don't want to like throw everything away. Yeah. So yeah, so I'm there. I'm in Canada right now visiting my family for the summer.
Oh, okay. Was that a challenge? I mean, being so family oriented unless you went with family.
No, it was so hard. It was so difficult. Like I was living alone, and every day I was like, wow, like I didn't realize how used to I got of like having such a big family. And for the first time being alone, it was like depressing almost, I would say.
There's something to like being around people who just know you and you don't have to explain yourself. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah. Like you meet somebody new, it's like, oh, you don't really know me. So like I'm going to be on my P's and Q's and like, you know, just kind of get a feel for you. Whereas like, dude, you've known me since I was a kid. I don't have to explain anything to you. Like you just know who I am, and you're not going to take anything the wrong way because you've known me forever.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think it was a little bit worse because I knew that I wasn't planning on staying in Columbus forever. And so like any friendship I would make would be just like filler. Like it's like for the time being. Yeah. Right. And so that was kind of really hard too, because it's like I'm not putting roots down here. Like I don't want to be away from my family, and I know I'm not going to live in Columbus forever. So it was just like this really weird like time in my life where it's just kind of like going through the motions almost. Like
you were like not like a ghost, but like rootless, and that's I think that's a big thing. I think that's what it is, and I think a lot of people are rootless. They just don't know it. Yeah, exactly. Because you know what it feels like to be grounded in like, you know, your family and, you know, the culture that you guys had built to, you know, to being completely separated from it.
Yeah, it was really hard, and I ended up making some friends. And I was like grateful for that, because I ended up finding people who, you know, shared like similar values to me and who were very good and kind people. And I think that's a challenge too, because you could always end up being friends with somebody who doesn't have your best interests, right?
Right. Yeah. But you don't want to be alone. So it's like you'll take it. And it's like...
Exactly. And that was something I really wanted to avoid. I was like, okay, I'm not just going to willy-nilly like do things because I'm alone. And I think that's part of it, right? It's the rootlessness plus being alone makes you look for any connection. And I think that's where a lot of like people my age especially go wrong. Because again, it's the physical contact. It's not I actually want to get to know you, what kind of a person you are. I want you to know what kind of a person I am. I'm just lonely right now.
And I'll take whatever I can get.
Exactly. And that can end up being really difficult. Because I know people who have ended up like hooking up with people because they were lonely, and all of a sudden there's a child involved, right? Like, and that happens more than you think.
Oh, I don't doubt it. No. Yeah. I think people are lone, like, we're so connected and we're so disconnected, and I think it's you know, great that you were so self-aware, because you know that you can put yourself in, you know, bad situations, just not being aware that like, hey, these are the things that are going on for me, and you know, I don't want to do something because of this thing. I've recognized it, so I'm very, very aware of it. So, high five to you for being able to do it, because that could have been, a lot of trouble. And, thank God that you were able to be aware of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I noticed it too, because at the time I was really like sad, and I was like, okay, like it's really hard to be away from my family. But like I decided that, okay, like I have a goal. My goal is to get my degree. Now I'm gonna focus on that goal rather than like kind of be like, okay, like be aimless about my life. I think that's one of the things along with the rootlessness, it's the aimlessness. Like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's in my future. I don't know what's next for me. It's like taking one thing, like one step at a time, is what gets you through moments like that.
Very good. I think we're coming up on time here, but so let's go ahead and plug the storytellers program that you just came out, because that just came out, and I think I remember seeing it. I was like, oh, this is really cool, and I shared it.
Yeah.
But you want to go ahead and give a little plug for that?
So I am a freelancer. I built an audience on Twitter, and so I realized the power that the internet basically has, and especially building an audience, because you can direct that to any work that you do. So I started a Twitter account. It's called Roobz, at Roobz Storytelling. And along with that, I also have a course where you can learn to build your own audience, either on Twitter mainly, and use that kind of as a post, like if you have a podcast, if you have a newsletter, if you have coaching, anything like that, basically direct your audience to all of those things. So it's at Roobz Storytelling. I also have a newsletter, which is in the link of that account. And yeah, I hope you guys find it useful. I was nervous to actually make that, because I'm like, okay, like I'm super young. I don't know if anybody will take me seriously, but it's been really good feedback. So yeah, I'm happy about that.
Outstanding. And I had a tweet the other day, and it was like, the internet has allowed us to fail faster, and that's actually a good thing. Because like before, like if I wanted to start a business, like it took a lot of effort, and then it was like, okay, it didn't work, and so now I got to go back to the drawing board. Like this has really allowed it to be like, you can go and like change, and like you started another account. So I recommend it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's a great point, because I failed a lot before my freelancing business. Like I said, I tried so many things. I was into drop shipping, and that didn't work out, and I was doing other things. I was building websites, nothing was like sticking, and it is that opportunity to fail faster, to move forward like faster towards the thing that that is actually meant for you. So I think that's a really great point.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Roobz. You can find her at Tishrei, and then also at the other Twitter account, which was what again?
At Roobz Storytelling.
At Roobz Storytelling. So I'll put the links in the notes. But Roobz, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing, and I've learned so much in speaking to you.
Thank you, Joel, for having me. This was really, really fun, and it was a great conversation. I'm excited for people to hear it.
Thank you.